Greetings, Summoners. Cosmic here, and welcome back to another deck profile for Dawn of History, or BSS 01. And today we are talking about the big bad himself, Nova, or the Star Dragons deck. And something I want to talk about right up front is this very likely will be the last true deck profile video. And the reason why is because I think there's something I haven't done a great job of conveying in these videos so far that doesn't really work until you see how they play out. But if you're seeing this list, most people will think that this is the most important thing for every deck profile video, right? Give me a 50 card list. Let's start with it. And it has to be this exact 50 cards for the Battle Spirits Star Dragons deck. And that couldn't be further from the truth for any deck for Battle Spirits Saga, right? So you might think this is important, but what's actually important is this. And this really is a fundamental difference that you'll find in Battle Spirits and Battle Spirits Saga compared to other games like Magic, just because I know that's what a lot of people have a background is, in that you have your early drops like Arc and maybe a Nexus, right? Because those are both very good. You want your early cost reductions. You have your big finishers with Siegwurm and Nova, because Siegwurm is going to play in a Nova like we talk about. And then you're playing for Absolute Ice Shield because it's just a very good card, right? But beyond that, it doesn't matter. The whole mid game does not matter, and you can do what you want to do. Do you want to play a more confront package and have like Thundering Peaks? You can do that. Do you want to like lean in even more on Star Dragons and increase the quantity of them and talk about Andromedos to be the searcher for it and then have more hits for the Star Dragons, which might be a better list in set 2? That's also a possibility. Or do you want to just do like red generic good stuff and play like Lava Fish and play like the Dragnogard, I think his name is, like the Nexus Destruction guy for a low cost? He's a 3 cost, 3 reduction, but just an early body to play, and then have Nova as just this late game, oh, if I need a finisher. So if I can find enough people to record with, and what I think would be a much better use of these style of videos is instead what W1 does, and you can go check them out. They're a massive Battle Spirits YouTuber, but they do a really nice job of just saying, hey, here's a deck, here's the outline that we're using, and they spend like, I don't know, a minute talking about it, like, hey, here's Nova, it's good because it heals you up, and here's what it wants to do. And then they just jam some games, and honestly, that might be the best approach for Saga, period, because yes, there is sideboarding, yes, there is best of 3, but there's just a lot of different decks to cover and a lot of gameplay to record that, again, if I can find a couple more people to do recording with on a regular basis, I would love to just put out 3 videos like that where it's like, hey, first couple of minutes of a video is a deck profile, and then here's 3 matches, right? Just something straightforward like that. So I'm not 100% sold yet, and I apologize. I've just been changing the different strategies or ideas I've had for this type of videos and what I want to do with the channel, but it is, the more I play, the more I realize a video like this just doesn't hold a lot of weight at the end of the day, because a lot of people can change these and just do whatever they want with them, because there is so much flexibility that you have, and changing something like just putting in Thundering Peaks will play very differently for a Nova deck than the list that we have here. So that was a very long-winded way just to say more changes coming to the channel. Hopefully, again, I'm going to be a burden on me to just actually play a lot of games and make sure I get all the recording done, and then a lot more editing. But I think it'll just be better for the overall, YouTube meta, as it were, right? Of like just getting better content out there, focusing on gameplay. So that said, let's actually just talk about the deck and get into each individual cards with Supernova Draogn Siegwurm Nova. This card is obviously insane. It is one of the best X rares in the deck, if not in the set, if not one of the best X rares in the game, period. But it does have a heavy cost with the ascend of 6 cost or more. So you do have to sacrifice something to play it, which if you are playing a light amount of 6 drops in the deck, you can get stuck with some of these. That's why I like playing the extra play set of 6 drops. Some people I've seen just play 6, but I really do feel like you want to just push that number up to 8, because the other 6 drop that we're playing, other than Siegwurm, is really, really good. So Nova himself, obviously the mascot, one of the 2 mascots, I should say, of set 1, they had to make it good, right? So when summoned, if you sacrifice effectively a Siegwurm and your Soul Core, meaning you lose that Soul Core for the rest of the game, which is going to downpower some of your spells and units and what have you, you get to heal back up to 5. And with a card like Absolute Ice Shield, right, you can go down to 1 life very easily, heal back up to 5, and that's a lot of cores that your opponent has just given you. And yes, you have to still have, the draw power behind it to support it, so you don't just empty out your hand after you go for this big combo, but it's pretty easy in what red wants to be doing to draw a bunch of extra cards and have a backup after you slam this Nova on the table. So big body, high BP. Obviously costs a lot. We have ways to make it cheaper, which we'll talk about later. And then its other effect, like if healing wasn't enough, right? Like healing up to 5 is very, very good in this game. You're not going to find very many effects that heal you, period, let alone 2/5. But then at level 2 and level 3, when the spirit attacks, select any number of your opponent's spirits with a combined total of 10,000 or fewer BP and destroy them. So this is just a straight up board deletion as well against a number of other decks. So especially if you're going against yellow, you're going to kill 4 or 5 things a lot of times, whether they're playing the lower the ground version. If you're playing against a more mid-range matchup, you might only be killing 2 or 3 spirits, but surprise, killing 2 or 3 spirits and then saying, hey, I'm going to do the same thing again on the next turn unless you remove this unit is very, very strong. And a lot of decks will admittedly just die on the spot to that. If you get to board wipe them, knock out their spirits, and if they don't have an immediate answer and you're not able to redeploy threats onto the field effectively, Nova just ends the game. So yes, it is a high cost. Yes, it does require, X, Y, and Z to all come together. But when you resolve this effect, and again, why I talked about so much about it's just the late game that matters, right? Like what's at your top end? What is your key spirit in your deck that you're trying to do? Nova really is an all-star at doing that and saying, hey, he's here to stay. And again, this is a card that I would not be surprised at all if it's lasting from, set 2, set 3, and so forth, because it is just such a strong effect, and deleting 10,000 and lower BP is not to be, or combined, I should say, right? 10,000 combined lower is not to be scoffed at. It's a very, very strong effect. So Nova clearly here to stay. The Saga Rare, I'm sure, is going to be beautiful, even if it's not for me, but this is a card that I'm going to be picking up a playset of no matter what, because it is a very, very strong, and again, if not one of the best X rares in set 1. Moving on from there, we have our Nexus package, because again, early game does matter, and I really can't stress enough, this can be pretty much anything based on how you're playing your deck. So Volcanic Canyon, I think, gets a lot of love for just being a filter option, but it's definitely not one of the, always goes into every red deck style, because you might want to have things like Scorch Battlefield and Fault if you're playing like Gigana Rex, which then makes a case of if you want to have a more confront-heavy package and maybe more of a low-to-the-ground aggressive strategy, you could do something like Scorch Battlefield and, Thundering Peaks, as instead to slide into this Nova package. That said, with this version of the deck, because we have so much draw function, because we are just trying to find Nova and a couple more threats on the back end, getting the filter options with Volcanic Canyon, as well as being a turn 1 play that we can do, is very, very strong. And not to be missed, only 1 core needed to give it all your spirits 1,000 BP during the attack step is very, very relevant against other red decks who might be trying to use their Volcanic Breaks against you, or just other BP deletion effects or reductions like yellow, right? So Angelic Pressure, Exhaust, Nexus, what have you. Volcanic Canyon does quite a bit of work for you in that regard. And then same thing can be said about Scorch Battlefield. Gives us 1,000 BP, which is really nice, but for this one, you get to draw extra cards. So this is, again, a consideration where you have, and beautiful card from the starter deck, that in some cases, you'll just be in this mid-game where you haven't quite found your pieces yet. You have like a confront unit or whatever it is, right? You're able to put 2 cores on this and say, okay, listen, opponent, I'm either going to kill your units or I'm going to draw some cards, because red, again, naturally has a higher BP than, let's say, purple and yellow. And again, even against some white decks, depending on what they're playing, it's not too hard to get over those thresholds. So when these Scorch Battlefields and other BP bonus effects start to stack on, you put your opponent in a really tough position. And in some cases, you just won't need Nova, right? You'll just be able to grind them out through your mid-game plan while being able to draw extra cards through Scorch Battlefield. And then something like a big Andromeda with a 10k confront, it's just going to delete their board. It's going to be slower, so they might draw out of it. But in some cases, you can just win off that, generic good confront guy, because that's what red does. So in terms of Nexus, these are the 2 that I was playing. And again, there's a lot of different versions of the Nova deck I'd run, but I like these at least for a good starting point. So definitely as I'm going through this is just a good starting point for Nova, but it is absolutely something that you're going to want to test against if you're going to the launch events, or just in general. Like this will be a thing in, set 1 launches at your local store for these store tournaments. Nova is not going anywhere anytime soon. Talking about red and all things that we love is, why not just draw some cards, right? So Star Blessed Draw obviously gets a lot better in a meta with more when summon effects, but at the end of the day, it is still a 2 for draw 2 for red, which is fine in a lot of cases against, a purple and yellow being in the meta. You're going to draw 4, and that feels great. And then Charge Draw 2 for 2 again, but it does have the added bonus of being able to BP boost one of your spirits. And truthfully, Charge Draw is kind of nuts in that regard. It does come up quite a bit where, it's not common, right, for the red player to have a random BP boosting effect, But sometimes if you're going, especially if you're going against white, right, and you know they're going to have like a suppression or something, sometimes you just need to save that charge draw for that BP boost to get rid of like their enterprise or something, and that's totally fine. So charge draw's flexibility really can't be understated in that regard. And if you were to say, hey, I want to run some draw in my red deck, but I don't want to run all 8 cards, like 4 and 4, because I'm trying to fit for other stuff, which one would I run? And for me, it's honestly charge draw, just because you're not always, I don't think yellow is going to be played a lot in general, which as much as it breaks my heart, right? So I think when summon effects are going to be kind of out of the meta a little bit, then charge draw just always has that flexibility for you. That said, they're both very, very good cards. I'm sure going to be staples for red for some time to come. And, you know, just something that you're going to want to look forward to if you're trying to be playing red. Now, in terms of the kind of more mid-game and things that I like to build in these decks, and I know I called Arc a staple because he really just is, like having that protection against like the ultimate go wide yellow rush, but most importantly too is his secondary effect is quite good, and I think that it gets missed a lot because it doesn't always come up in terms of like gameplay videos or like how your opponent's playing, because it only hits 2,000 or less, but it fundamentally changes how your opponent wants to play the game, because now they can't just put out like a great bow angel at level 1 because it's just going to die to arc. So then you're investing 3 cores onto it for only a 3,000 base, and that feels pretty terrible, all things considered. Yellow has a lot of cards like that. Purple actually has a surprising number of cards like that. Obviously, in red and white, it's a little bit not as great, but it's still just a very all-around good card that, again, unless we're in some world where like everybody and their mothers is on mid-range and controlled decks where like Arc gets no value, then you're cutting it. But at the same time, that's like the perfect opportunity for a yellow deck, like super low to the ground yellow deck, to just win the meta. So something to keep in mind. Maybe it's 2 main, 2 side is what you end up on, because you want to at least have some number of it, but you bring in more flex options like Horn Grizzly and Parasaur, right? So those are some other options. Fierce Gore Horn Grizzly, I really do like this because this is a turn 1 play going first, and then on your next turn, right, you can threaten a 5k confront, which is really, really strong. And again, this goes more of a, do I want to play a mid-range board control style of red? Because of course, this is also good in the Emperor Beast decks, and maybe get some more value out of Scorched Battlefield. So maybe you run 4 Scorched Battlefields. Now this is a 6k that's attacking. And then on turn, was it 3, I guess, technically, because you have to pay the Scorched Battlefield, what have you. That's very, very good. That's hitting some really, really nice numbers in red. And then if you get a second one, it goes up to 7k, which is great. I love this card. I keep going back and forth of like how many I want to include in the deck. It's something I was playing like 4 and then 4 Parasaur just to like maximize my confront values. But it could be another case where you play 4 Horn Grizzly because you just really want that turn 1 play, and then you just completely cut Parasaur because at some point you're not going to have the Soul Core anymore in your deck, and then you don't get the draw effect. But for the games that you do try to last out for the Nova as long as you can, I really do like Parasaur because it draws you the extra cards. And again, we have a lot of card draw. That's what red wants to be doing, but sometimes you just have to find your Nova as quick as possible, or you might be dead. And again, getting to confront something for 5k and draw a card is just one of the best feelings in the world, because it's going to kill a lot and draw you a card. What more could you ask for? And now the card that I know gets a lot of back and forth if people like it or not, Nebula Dragon Andromeda. Hopefully I said this is one of my favorite cards in the early set reviews, and it remains true. Having the flexibility of a 3k pop, as well as a Nexus pop, as well as confront at 5 for 10. Also, I thought 5 cores was going to be way more expensive with how this deck was going to play out. No, 5 cores is fine. Like, just having a 10k confront is absolutely okay. This card slaps. It is somehow even better than what I thought it was going to be. Now, again, the downside of this is that it is a when summoned effect. So there is this like big brain meta play that you want to cut back on as many when summoned effects as possible, so you don't get counter sword, or you don't give your opponent Star Blessed draw, or you don't give them insert other insane, burst when summoned effect here. I get that, but I think for just the flexibility that Andromeda offers you, you just suck it up and have to play it. Like, this card just does so much for Nova, and it's a 6 cost, so it does help fulfill that role of Ascend 6. And while you won't heal off this, right, because it's missing the Siegwurm wording, it does give you a way to play Nova, which can then be a bigger board deletion. And there's going to be some turns where you're just like, okay, play Andromeda, do my thing, blow up your Nexus, go into Nova, then delete your board, and now you just like costed your opponent 4 reduction, right? That's really difficult to come back from, admittedly. So I realize, again, Andromeda is kind of you're on the fence about it because of the one summon effect, but I really do think it's a very, very solid card, and you should absolutely consider running it. So if you haven't already, make sure you pre-order 2 of the red starter decks, because this is the only way to get it. And I'm sure this card's going to be good for a little bit. So when the red starter deck is not available anymore, this card, could have a pretty insane price tag on it for those who maybe bought extra red starter decks or are just flipping their extras for whatever reason. This card is more or less our queen of purple, right? To make a One Piece reference. This card does so much in red that if you want to play red, you have to get the starter decks. It is that important. And then, of course, it's not a good red deck unless it has some type of removal package built in. So Burning Force and Volcanic Break are just the ones I go with. Having extra Burning Force, so it's like your 5th Nexus breaker, as well as being able to delete 2 3,000 BP spirits, is just all around really good. Like, this Burning Force is so good for those that might not know yet, that you are playing it in purple decks because it just gives so much flexibility, and it is such a good... You're also playing in white decks, I guess, to be fair. You're playing in other decks at full cost because of how good it is. And now you're playing red, which can play this for 3 instead. Whew! Cards busted. Get your foils early. It's insane. And then Volcanic Break, it's one of those things that's like, it's really nice that you can hit 6k BP on a couple cards when you have the Soul Core. But again, this is a deck that actively wants to burn the Soul Core. I shouldn't say as soon as possible, but basically as soon as possible, right? Like, you want to get those extra cores, you want to take some damage, get some more ramp, Nova heal back up to 5, and then just crack back with even more pressure because you have more cores than your opponent. So Volcanic Break in that regard is a little bit worse. But again, that's why you're playing Volcanic Break, right? Or Volcanic Canyon, right? Because then you can just cycle away the Volcanic Break. There's too many Volcanics in this set. You can just cycle away the cards that go off the Soul Core, and you don't need them anymore. So that's a consideration as well for Canyon, but definitely something to consider when you're building your version of the deck. And then the last card, and this is going to be a shout out to Primitive Kage. Obviously, it's not in the original list, but he was playing Blazing Boar as I'm going to discard my Nova early and just have the option to get it back. And man, even with like just the Andromedas, like, I know I said this card was insane in my set review because of the flexibility it offers in getting random cards back. And then we got the Canyon, which obviously gave you even more filtering options. So just increased the value, so to speak, of Blazing Boar. But admittedly, I haven't tried it out in a few lists yet. Just like, I haven't been playing red, admittedly. I've been playing a lot of purple and a lot of yellow. And man, we jammed some games yesterday that I recorded, which I'm not sure if those games are going to get up or not, because they just weren't good quality games. It was just complete blowouts for a few of them. So, about being perfectly honest, like, Nova just rolled me. It's very, very not great content. So I probably won't upload it. But he played Blazing Boar a couple times, and it was in really, really critical situations. So, part of that is the power of red draw. Part of that is just the filtering option through Canyon. Like, I think Blazing Boar ultimately is going to need to be somewhere in your Star Dragon Nova list as a 1 or a 2 of. But again, this is something that I didn't have time to test with personally, so I'm just going to give a shout out to Prim and say that, hey, you should probably run this card somewhere in your main deck, even if it's just a 1 of, because it offers insane flexibility, and it was really good when it was good. And with that, that is the Star Dragon Nova version. But again, just one version of this deck that you should definitely use as a starting point, but then feel free to gut as many cards as you want, going back to that original point I made in the video, that it just has so much flexibility that you should not feel pressured into having, this version of it where it's just like heavy confront, heavy draw. There is so much more that you can do with this deck. And I really want to stress this again, that Battle Spirits as a game really rewards you. I should say Battle Spirits and Battle Spirits Saga really rewards you for just maining a color and just spending as much time as you can grinding away at that particular color and the combinations, because you will be able to next level your opponent with some card choices if you know what the meta is going to be like. And the level at which Battle Spirits does that, seriously, in my last 10 years of card playing, no other game has come close into that level of rewarding deck building for players. And I realize this is going to be something that's difficult to grasp at first, is like, as you're learning the game, seeing how the different cards come together and whatnot. And we're obviously only one set in, so the card pool is not that deep. But as we get set 2, as we get set 3, and really some of this starts to come together, I mean, I'm only, around 100 games in of the Dawn of History meta, and so much has changed in that short amount of time that I can only imagine how much more it's going to change once we get set 2 and get a whole new dump of color. options and combinations that we can do, that the game only gets better from here. And I really hope that when you have the opportunity to play it and start building these decks, that you get to experience that as well. It does take a while. Again, I'm around 100 games and I'm still learning a lot, but there's so much more to learn with this as well. So with that, again, there might be some more changes coming to the channel about how I approach gameplay videos and how I approach deck profiles, but I need to do my due diligence and go talk to some people and make sure I have enough people that want to record games and want to just jam some content and all that stuff. So please look forward to it if we can get there. But for now, this is potentially the last deck profile because we're going to change up the videos. But please, again, this is a deck you must know about for the launch events and the store tournaments that will be happening right after launch. This is a very solid deck. You know, include your tier 1 clickbait, whatever here. I don't do that stuff. But Nova is absolutely tier 1. It's here to stay, and it's a very, very good deck. So with that, my friends, stay safe, stay hydrated, and I'll see you in the next Battle Spirit Saga video. Cheers.